How have you managed to come back after some of the massive injuries you've suffered in Strongman? And what aspect is harder to come back from, the mental side or the physical side? And that was asked by Trevor C. Monsma.
Okay, injuries for me are a question I get asked about all the time. I get messages from people saying, the way I've come back from injuries has inspired them and helped them after they've been injured. But one of the questions I'm always getting asked is, how do you kind of come back from the mental side? The mental side of injuries is actually harder than the physical sometimes. There's different types of injuries that you can get, but the most common types of injuries you're going to have as a strength athlete or someone in the gym is normally some kind of muscle rupture. You can have tendon issues, but muscle ruptures are the main injuries that you're going to suffer in terms of competition in strongman, powerlifting, those type of movements. And the most important thing to start with is understand that you can come back from an injury. One thing I see so often is athletes get one injury and they give up. If you give up, you ain't going to be any good, okay? You're never going to come back. You're never going to reach the potential that you can reach. And just to give you a good example, I've been beaten down many times with injury. Just to go through a list of some of my injuries. Both calves I've torn, both hamstrings, both quadriceps, my right bicep, my right tricep, my right labrum, my lat, my Achilles, which is the most kind of recent one, along with a number of other injuries that I've suffered, back issues, shoulder issues.
Broken toe.
Toes, digits, they don't count. You just strap them up and get on with it. But I've had my fair share of injuries, and I guess, they do knock you down. It's hard coming back from injuries, and I sort of, as I had more injuries, I learned that I can cope with them better and better and better, for want of a better word. But I learned that an injury isn't the end. It's devastating at the time. It's mentally, you put your whole life and your whole, everything you do is working towards bettering yourself, getting yourself ready for a certain contest, and to go there, put all that effort, time, money, that you put into it, sacrifice, to have an injury stop you being able to achieve what you believe you're capable of is very, very difficult. But you have to learn from these things and come back. If you give up, you're never going to be any good. You're never going to reach the level you need to. So the way I cope with injuries now, if I get an injury, the first thing I do is I have my little sulk. You're allowed to sulk, okay? So you get injured, you've got 24 hours to sulk about it. You can go and have your ice cream, you can get your missus to look after you. Liz knows she's got 24 hours where she's got to cheer me up. Is that fair?
And the rest, but yeah.
All right, 48 hours. I get 48 hours where I can sulk and she'll pamper to me. But to be fair, if I keep it up, you just kick me up the ass.
Yeah.
And
I have a limit.
You have a limit, and I need it. As an athlete, I need that kick up the ass to think, right, now it's time to do something about it. So the first thing you do is actually find out what is wrong. And so many people will message me with a certain injury, but they don't really know what it is. So you need to make sure either you're going to see a doctor, and a good doctor that understands injuries, or you're getting a scan. My go-to is always go and get a scan. I don't like to guess what's wrong with me, because by guessing, you're not necessarily going to address the issue. So the first thing I'll do is go and get a scan. Often I'll pay privately to go and get a scan, because I don't like waiting 6 weeks to go through the doctors. So for me, it's go and get a scan, find out exactly what the issue is. Once I know what's wrong, I'll talk to the doctors, talk to the physios, and we will come up with a plan of action. Sometimes things need surgery, so you're going to be out of action for a while. Other times, it's not such a big issue. I've had a number of minor muscle strains and pulls, and you'll often get people saying they've torn something, and they actually haven't. It's just a minor rupture or a muscle pull, and those type of injuries can recover very, very quickly. So they're not a huge issue. A real muscle tear or a tendon rupture, that's where it's kind of serious, and you're going to be out of action for a lot longer. But the first most important thing is finding out exactly what's wrong. Then it's coming up with an action plan to get yourself back to your best. And this is where smart training and smart rehab will help that mental side of things. So for me, I don't just jump straight back into lifting the numbers that I did before. I will jump off in a tangent slightly, because when I was younger, I made that mistake of trying to come back too quickly and trying to get my numbers back to where they were. It's a mistake to do. You know, I'll often get messages from people saying, what can I do? I've got a competition in 2 weeks. I've just injured this and this. What can I do to make sure I'm okay for that comp? Don't be afraid to miss a show. Now, I'm not saying that case if it's a minor injury, but if you've got a serious injury, don't go and make it worse. Okay, you're going to end your career by doing things like that, or massively impact your career. I am telling you from someone with experience, I genuinely believe if I knew now what I knew when I was younger, I could have been a better athlete. So for clients of mine, young athletes watching, older athletes that have kind of had their first injury, take my advice. Don't rush back to competing. Make sure you get yourself fit, you get yourself ready, and build that strength back up. Because what we tend to do when you get an injury, you compensate. So, for instance, a good example is when I tore my labrum. It's probably one of my biggest injuries, not in terms of size, but impacting my performance. I tore my labrum in China in 2012. I did 7 competitions in a row, 7 competitions in 6 weeks. Don't ever do that. Another lesson for you guys. I've made a lot of mistakes, so please make sure you learn from them. To all my clients now, I always tell them don't compete too often, because you don't give yourself time to recover, you end up injuring yourself. Again, I've made the mistakes. I'm not just telling you from to try and make you feel bad. I've made those mistakes myself. But I tore my labrum in 2012, and my log was going really well. I was probably the best at pressing I'd ever been in my life. It was getting better and better. Went to China. I did an event, the dumbbell press. It was raining. I rushed it, made a mistake technically, ended up tearing my labrum, and my pressing went downhill really fast. I tried to come back too quickly, and then I ended up aggravating it again and again rather than letting it recover properly. It wasn't until probably a few years ago that I actually rehabbed it properly and got myself back to pressing the kind of numbers that I could earlier on in my career. But because I was so desperate to compete, I kept trying to get back to where I was, made that mistake of putting too much weight on the bar and knocking myself backwards all the time. The body compensated, and then I ended up injuring other things because your body ends up trying to use different muscle groups to compensate. And then injuries again. Torn lat, torn tricep, all connected because I didn't get that thing fixed as effectively as I should have to start with, because I was so desperate to compete again. So first lesson to learn is do not rush with these type of things. Take your time, get it fixed properly. There's always going to be another competition. You don't have to be competing at every show, particularly for those of you that are just getting into the sport and you're new to it. One injury is a learning opportunity. It's not necessarily a setback. I've managed to use the injuries that I've had to improve my knowledge. I've gone away and researched more about nutrition, about recovery, about different methods that will allow me to recover and be better. And the way I've been able to come back and win some of my biggest shows after injuries is learning to adapt. I've had to adapt, I've had to change, I've had to think outside the box, but I managed to come back and win my biggest shows just after probably my worst mental state back in 2014, was it? 2015, when I had a serious injury at World's Strongest Man. Tore my tricep, got crushed by this huge big, it was called a Norse hammer, very much like a Fingal's finger but with a hammerhead on the end of it. There's videos of me absolutely devastated. Liz kind of next to me. I was finished, I was done, and it was only I was on that brink of kind of absolutely giving up, where because of the support of people close to me, my family, I managed to keep going. I managed to sort of find it myself, because I genuinely love training. I love Strongman. I was like, Liz actually just kicked me out of the house, probably had enough of me whinging and moaning, go and train, and I started to just make sure I enjoyed it. I went to Britain's Strongest Man 2016, and I think I came third. Was it third or second? I can't even remember where I placed, but I was so into the moment of enjoying the show and not putting that stress on myself that I just had a great time. And it was like, okay, I can still do this. And then I started making sure my training was a bit more serious. I really got focused with my food, I got focused with my training, built up towards Europe's Strongest Man, and ended up winning the biggest title I've ever won, beating Hafthor Julius Bjornsson, you know, winning a huge major title in Strongman. And that all came after 2 torn hamstrings, torn quad, torn bicep, torn tricep, serious back issues, torn labrum, torn lat. I got my biggest victory after setback after setback after setback after setback, and it just shows you should never give up. I've never won World's Strongest Man, but I've won the Ultimate Strongman World Title. I've won Europe's Strongest Man. I've won countless Champions Leagues. I've won countless Giants Live shows. I've won Britain's Strongest Man twice. I've won the UK's Strongest Man. I've broken world records. I've had a very successful career, but it was definitely not without devastating times and real knockdowns and setbacks. But you cannot give up. You have to learn from it. So use any opportunity to grow, to get better. Ask questions. Find good nutritionists. Find good chiropractors. Find good physios. Work with people that can make you evolve and keep you getting better. And focus on that mental strength to keep coming back. But just make sure you don't rush it. That's the best advice I can give you when it comes to injuries. They're going to happen, particularly in sports like Strongman. But any sport you look at, the top athletes have been injured. 90% of the top athletes in Strongman have been injured. In fact, 100% have been injured. 90% have suffered major injuries. Zadrunas has had a number of major injuries, but he came back and became the greatest strongman of all time. Every single strongman out there has had their fair share of injuries and knockbacks, but it's how you overcome them that's going to make you great. And honestly, do not give up, because when it's at its darkest is probably when you're closest to the big kind of the victories and the celebrations and the successes. But it is hard. I know from experience. I've had probably more than most in terms of injuries, but I've never let it keep me down. Even now with my Achilles is physically making things a lot harder, but I'll adapt, I'll overcome, and eventually I'll be back competing.